Back with me now, MSNBC political contributor Jason Johnson and co-founder of Black Voters Matter, LaTosha Brown. And joining the table, the director of Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security, Nola Haynes, making her cross-connection debut. Happy to have you all. LaTosha, I want you to kick us off because I interviewed you. I wrote about this in my book. In 2016, the IRA, the Russian Internet Research Agency, was laser focused on Black voters. Russian operatives purchased over 3,000 Facebook and Instagram ads to influence the presidential election by exploiting toxic race relations here in America. I don't have to tell you that. Their online army reached at least 146 million people, and Black folks were the single group targeted the most heavily. It wasn't even a close margin. Given that we are really making a bigger enemy of Russia right now with this unprovoked invasion in Ukraine, how concerned are you that they will once again target Black voters and use white supremacy as a way to further strike discord in this country?
Oh, I'm very concerned. I think that they will target all of American voters. What they know is that America has an appetite, an insatiable appetite for white supremacy. And so that there is a paradigm. I can draw a line directly about what is happening in Ukraine and what is happening in America. And when we look at the midterm elections, we're going to have to recognize that democracy is on the ballot. When we look at the midterm elections, we're going to have to recognize that what people are facing in the Ukraine is what happens when you've got abuse of power that is rooted in structural racism and white supremacy that seeks to actually challenge the sovereignty, the democratic rights, and the agency of a people. That is exactly what we're seeing happen here, where we're seeing Republicans support voter suppression and trying to undermine democratic norms. And so there is a paradigm. I'm not surprised that there are Republicans who are actually lifting up Putin because they have the same mindset as a Putin. They're rooting their belief in a consolidation of white supremacist power at the expense of undermining the democratic rights and sovereignty and self-determination of other people.
Yeah, and I think that's something that when we ask, why do we care what's happening in Ukraine, that is one of the reasons, because this can cast a dark shadow over our own domestic politics. And we're seeing that play out in some of these Republican talking points that we're seeing espoused, not just on Fox News, but at white nationalist rallies like the one we showed. Nola, I want to turn to you on this because something that's striking to me about Putin, I mean, just a week ago, we saw Zelensky on the world stage begging for help, saying he should not have to beg, saying, this is something that NATO countries should do. They should protect him. Seeing this, it was pretty clear early on that Putin did not seem to care about sanctions. That was not going to be the thing to stop him. And it's almost as if he does not plan to suffer those consequences. I want to make a parallel here. We're taking this very seriously, but I do want to make a parallel to Game of Thrones, because there was a very similar scene in this series where someone else, another villain, did not plan to suffer the consequences. Take a look and we'll talk about it after.
If the accused is not here, she will be tried regardless. We cannot escape the justice of the gods.
Forget about the bloody gods and listen to what I'm telling you. Cersei understands the consequences of her absence, and she is absent anyway, which means she does not intend to suffer those consequences.
That is how I'm looking at Vladimir Putin. He knows what could happen to him on the global stage. He does not care about sanctions. He has continued to advance Russian forces. It looks like he does not intend to suffer the consequences. What's your take, and what would be the thing to stop him?
I am still thinking about what LaTosha just said. I agree with everything you said. Like, there's a through line between that type of behavior. We know it all too well here in the United States. But I want to say, some of that's posturing, because there is no way that you are going to convince me that this man has not calculated the severity of sanctions, especially because he wants to be the player. He wants to be the diva of the international community. And so how can you be the diva of the international community when you are now a pariah, when you are now completely isolated? So I do not believe that Putin is not concerned about sanctions, that he's not concerned about NATO being deployed for the first time, that he's not concerned about being kept out of the global financial markets. I just refuse to believe that. That's just part of his posturing. That's part of the dictator's mandate, that nothing stays on them, that they are Teflon and nothing bothers bothers them. And I will tell you where I am really concerned, even if Putin isn't, I am concerned about the Russians, especially Russian women. I am concerned about women in Ukraine, especially if Russia comes in and they take over Ukraine. I mean, this is an issue that we talk a lot about at WCAPS. We are concerned about the everyday people. We are concerned about the global dinner tables of the world. And those global dinner tables are usually run by women. And so that's a very kind of roundabout way of saying, firstly, I do not think that he does not care. However, I also think he heavily miscalculated. He miscalculated our commitment to our security responses, and he also underestimated the Ukrainians, which is part of this kind of imperialistic mindset that Ukrainians are not going to stand up and fight. They don't even deserve to be a sovereign country. So there's a lot of miscalculation, and I really do believe that he's feeling the heat of it.
So you just heard Jason. Nola says she does believe that Putin does care, but clearly he does not care enough,
right? Because
he has not stopped.
Right.
So what is the off-ramp for him if one such off-ramp exists?
I don't think there is one. And here's the thing. I always think this is important. This is why we're great. We have people like Malcolm. We have security experts. There's a tremendous amount of humility that I always have in these sorts of issues. I'm a political scientist. I'm not an expert in global affairs. But let's be honest about what's really happening here. This is just imperialism, right? Like Putin's goal is he wants to recreate, bring the band back together, recreate that sort of Warsaw Pact Voltron from the 80s, because one of the through lines that you can say in Russian politics has been they feel emasculated, they feel insulted that they had to give up their empire to the United States. And for him to go down as the great leader that he wants to be in history, recollecting those territories is what he wants to do. I think it's important also for Americans to understand when you hear people criticizing NATO, when you hear people saying, well, America provoked them and it's just as bad, et cetera, two things can be true. You can criticize American imperialism and criticize Russian imperialism. And that's part of what we're seeing here. Clearly, NATO was not about to invite Ukraine into their fold because if Ukraine was really that much of a threat to Russia, then we would already have troops there.
Yeah.
Whereas President Biden said, no, we got to get out. So that's the thing I think people need to understand, that this is imperialism on behalf of Vladimir Putin, and it is a danger to the rest of Europe and our economy. And we don't know what could happen in other parts of the world because we've already seen that China has made certain statements and has been looking at other parts of the world as well. So we have to really be concerned about this one.
Yeah, I agree. And it's kind of making the point that Ukraine does need NATO protection, given what we're seeing happen here. So this conversation is worth more than the time we have for this block. So I want our panel to stick around.